Now it's a time of changes. Now it's the time to move on. This is the time for solutions. Feel the motion. BNEW is born. BNEW none of you. Now I'm connected to you. BNEW none of you. BNEW will do it for you. This is the time for solutions. BNEW is for you.
Buenos días. Seguimos desde el canal B-Logistics en la antigua fábrica Estrella Damm, hablando de logística marítima, de sostenibilidad, del software as a service, y ahora nos vamos a centrar sobre todo en el cambio climático y el efecto que tiene en las infraestructuras portuarias. Recordamos que también tenéis el B-Village para hacer networking y conectar con aquellas empresas que puedan ser de vuestro interés para los negocios que tengáis en mano. Bueno, en paralelo, nosotros seguimos aquí en el plató del Logistics y, como decía, hablando de cambio climático, porque nos preguntábamos antes si la sostenibilidad y la digitalización son elementos compatibles o incluso la digitalización mal usada puede ser peligrosa. Algunos datos rápidos que me parecen, ahora Jesús hablaremos, básicos, ¿no? Por ejemplo, el 84% de las emisiones de carbono se pueden reducir subiendo a la nube los programas. Incluso el 65% del consumo de energía también se puede reducir para todas aquellas empresas que apuesten por una digitalización. Jesús, buenos días. Ahora presentarás a tus ponentes, tanto en este formato físico como también conectado. Jesús Martínez es doctor en Ciencias e Ingeniería Náuticas y máster internacional en Gestión Portuaria por la Universitat Politécnica de Cataluña. También actualmente es director del máster y de la carrera universitaria en Logística, que se desarrolla en el Tecnocampus de Mataró, y vamos a dar una breve recomendación porque es autor de varios libros, pero uno de ellos que casa a la perfección con lo que estamos hablando ahora mismo sería el del Manual del Transporte Marítimo de Mercancías Peligrosas, y el de Fundamentos de Logística y Operatividad Portuaria. Muchísimas gracias. Todo tuyo, Jesús.
Gracias. Buenos días. Buenos días. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to the people who is connected from our institution. It's a big pleasure to be here presenting this event. I want to present, first of all, our panel. We have Mr. Mar Asaf, is the Chief of the Human Resources of the Development Section of the Train for Trade of the UNTAD in Geneva. He holds a Master in Economics from the University of Brussels, Belgium, and have over 20 years of experience in international institutions and private sector and different kind of companies in multinational level. He oversees a major program in the field in international of trade statistics as well, e-commerce, port management, to support the sustainable economic development in the line of the SDGs of the United Nations. Welcome, Mark, to this panel today. Isabel Rigos, welcome also. She is the Secretary General of the ESBO, European Seaport Organization, since 2013. Before taking this function, Isabel has been working as a director of the European Federation of Inland Port and senior advisor of the ESPO during 4 years. She studied at the University of Namur in Q11, European Law, University Catholic Delaware, before joining the European Federation of Inland Port, and she worked in EU public affairs almost 20 years also. Welcome, Isabel, to this panel as well. Ramon, here with us. She's a civil engineer from 1996 and in different positions carried in a private construction company, Comsa. It's in 1998, it's the execution of the works in the Port of Barcelona, including the works expansion on the port, the new South Dock, the famous South Dock of the Port of Barcelona. From 2007 to present, is working in the Barcelona Port Authority, and now is in the Department of Infrastructure and Conservation, Deputy General Manager of the Infrastructure and Conservation from the Port of Barcelona. Welcome also, Ramon. This is a big honor to be sharing this panel with you, all of you today. As you know, today we're going to be talking about climate change, okay? So we have to say that the seaports are essential for the global trade development as well. With over 80%, according to the UNTAD, you have now Mark today here, 80% of the trade volume of the carry is the cargo is carried by sea. from port to port. The crucial infrastructure, the nodes, and the global supply chain are overseas as well. But we have this big problem with the climate change as well. Sea level rise impacts in the trends and projection as well. Ports and connecting the coastal transport infrastructure from complex system. We have to take in mind maybe the economic losses in our account. The sea level rise is largely driven by global warming. Global warming can force a big sea level change and affecting our port infrastructure as well. And the projections have important implications from the adaptation of the port and also in our blue economy. So the first question I want to ask, start with Mark. The first question is talking about the climate change. According to the Global Risk Report 2021 for the World Economic Forum, the risks with the climate change, including climate action, failure, extreme weather, biodiversity loss, natural resource crisis, human environmental damage, are considered among the key risks from likelihood to impact point of view that will affect our life. From your institution, which are the policies that we are taking action to carry out to prevent and this impact of the industrial activities in this regard?
UNCTAD, the Conference on Trade and Development, the UN body, we are having our quadrennial ministerial conference. We get our mandate every 4 years with our member states. It's happening now. And the draft text that is being negotiated is actually putting at the very, very top of the agenda climate change and the climate crisis. The text from our delegates, and we represent 194 member states, says that the climate crisis really is endangering the security and the lives of millions of people. And this is reality. We have seen it the last 2-3 years, seeing directly on the scarcity of water, the food insecurity, and the effects in terms of intensity, in terms of frequency. And this is the direct effect for us as a trade and development body in the UN is the threatening of the international trade and the critical supply chains. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, those critical chains have been really, really damaged, and we could see it's not over with the price of the transport. So this is bringing back one element that is crucial for us and our member state is the Paris Climate Agreement from 2015. I mean, it's a long time ago, but it's alive and kicking with 2 degrees global warming, and also directly linked to that for us, the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction that is covering the period from 2015 to 2030, where more investments are needed. There are several elements that come out of the discussion that are happening now and are going to be closed at the end of this week. Allow me to go also and explain to you at the level of UNCTAD how the climate change is coming now across all programs in all of our divisions and colleagues working on those subjects. If you look already at the trade and development report of UNCTAD, in 2020, when we had the height of the pandemic, the message was already there in saying that the inequalities, because we're all talking about inequalities and vulnerabilities, but the inequalities were already revealed in 2008 with the financial crisis. The economic indicators that we have been observing since are getting worse. The debt explosion is getting really out of control, and this is creating more exposure to external shock. And external shocks comes under the shape of this climate crisis, climate change, and also pandemics. And the promises to fix the system did not happen. So we really have big problems in there. Another element I can refer to, because it was mentioned by the presenter before you raised us about the digitalization. When you look at the UNCTAD Digital Economy Report, the brand new one that was released a few days ago, is that we see that the data are actually playing a more increasing role as an economic and strategic resource. So data becomes now as a very special resource that is different than what we know for goods and services. Because this is another element we're working on trade statistics, right, for goods and services. And we see this domination from what is called digital platforms that have become now digital corporations. And we know all the names from Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and the big one. And we see that when we look at the bandwidth, data bandwidth, it is also dominated by two main routes, which is North America, Europe, and North America, China. And it's a bit, if I take a parallel with the maritime transport, it's those big main lanes also somehow connects to that, and they make the game. I can also refer to the work we are conducting directly related to maritime transport with our review of maritime transport. And it's been a few years that our colleagues here, UNCTAD, have mentioned this risk on climate change, and a lot of work has been done with seawater rising and others. From my side, in the program managing the Train for Trade Port Management Program, we have also adapted way back from 2018-19, before the pandemic, into our content on looking at the sustainable challenges of port, and climate change has become a huge element in that. And also in the work we're conducting on measuring port performance, we have included two indicators related to environment, and we started in this field. And Jesus, thank you once again. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, for your intervention. Isabel, please.
Yes, good morning, Jesus, and good morning, everyone, and thank you from my side as well for putting this topic on the agenda and involving us in that. So I just would like to say that for us, of course, for European ports, climate change is the first priority for European ports. It was mentioned we are on the first row when it comes to when the sea levels are rising. But the fact is also that ports are mission-driven elements, I mean mission-driven entities, let's say, so they want also to be helping into this solution. What is it? Because if we talk about ports, ports are not only these nodes in the supply chain and these trade gateways, let's say. Ports are also hubs of energy and also bring together a lot of industries. So we also have to see it from that perspective. And we see that in ports there are a lot of emissions coming together, even if the port management body is the creator, let's say, of these emissions. And what do we do as European Seaport Organization and as European Port? We monitor as SPO, we have every year an environmental report, and we monitor the situation. We see that, for instance, half of the ports experience major challenges because of climate change, flooding, sea levels rising. We then see that more than 6 of the 10 ports are taking steps to protect themselves better. And 7 of them have already taken into account when building new infrastructure. What do ports do to mitigate? There we have a lot of good examples, and we know, as I said, managing bodies can do the strongest things on what is within the remit. And this will be over the working boats, the mooring, tugs, and clean all those. They monitor, as I said. They put in place digital tools to optimize operations and as a consequence, try to reduce emissions of all stakeholders. They invest in renewables to become self-sufficient for the energy needed in the port, and they engage with stakeholders. We are also at European level, as you know, we have this a whole bunch of mission proposals that came out in July with the aim of greening the shipping sector. One of the important sectors that is tackled in these proposals. And there the ports would ask to facilitate the investments to help the shipping sector in green. This will be very challenging because, of course, for for the funding. Because these are investments that we do support managing, but often with no return on investment. So a lot is at stake, but what I would like maybe to, in 1 minute to say is that also ports are solving the problem, but they are also part of the solution. They are hubs of energy, and they can become also hubs of green energy and play a role in the whole sustainability, being hubs of sustainability. But that will have on first the impact being on your port infrastructure and the layout of your port if you engage in this new activity. Then we see also the new energies that come with new supply chains, other supply chains, and other connectivity, both the hinterland connectivity and the maritime connectivity, because I mean, where oil was coming from certain areas or is coming from certain areas and goes through certain ways to the hinterland and so on. This will be maybe another supply chain or other energies. Then the whole energy, if port wants to evolve in this new role as hub of energy, they will also have and are already engaging with new stakeholders and creating new partnerships. We think about the whole hydrogen economy, so this is also something to take into account. And then even more importantly is that the climate challenge is such a big challenge that ports will probably most of the time not be able to manage it by themselves. No way, they will have to create, and they are already doing through coalitions of the willing, and I think Barcelona the willing and Barcelona is a typical example where they engage in groups like Bookcap and so on that with big ports together they try to advance the climate agenda. And finally, I think what is also important is the whole greening of the ports and the role of ports in sustainable energy is that you will require skills, new profiles, new expertise. And this is also something to think about if ports want to play this role. So I will also leave that for this question.
Thank you very much, Isabel, for your intervention. It's a big concern for all of the ports in the European Union, also the work that they are making for preventing these effects on our infrastructure. Ramón, la misma pregunta para el puerto de Barcelona, ¿no? Hemos escuchado la visión desde las Naciones Unidas, la visión desde Europa, los puertos europeos, y ahora la visión desde nuestro puerto, el puerto de Barcelona.
Muchas gracias. A ver, para centrar un poco la cuestión, yo entiendo que todas las políticas que hoy en día se desarrollan en relación a la lucha contra el cambio climático se sitúan a dos niveles. Ya en algún momento ha salido en las exposiciones. A nivel de medidas de mitigación y de atenuación de todo lo que son los posibles efectos a futuro que pueda tener el cambio climático y específicamente medidas de adaptación. Cuando ya en el futuro los efectos que genera el cambio climático sean ya manifiestos y evidentes, pues todos en general nos tendremos que adaptar y entre otros los puertos, pues por nuestra ubicación estratégica en línea de costa y con múltiples efectos previstos que como pueden ser subida del mar, mayores oleajes, mayores precipitaciones, múltiples. Y yo querría destacar que a nivel de mitigación el puerto de Barcelona ya lleva trabajando desde hace años y ya estamos tomando medidas desde tiempo atrás. Específicamente este año se ha realizado la revisión del plan estratégico del puerto de Barcelona. Es un documento importantísimo porque marca nuestra visión y nuestro planteamiento a futuro en un horizonte corto del 2021 a 2025. Incluso esta vez ya prevemos un horizonte a largo término hacia 2040. La línea fundamental y estratégica de este plan es la sostenibilidad. Eso es, digámosle ya, el leitmotiv de este plan estratégico y fundamentada en tres aspectos. La sostenibilidad económica, la sostenibilidad social y la sostenibilidad medioambiental. Entonces, entrando ya en el tema de la sostenibilidad ambiental, es que los objetivos que específicamente allí tenemos marcados o que hemos asumido, pues son específicamente trabajar en la transición energética, trabajar en la descarbonización y específicamente en la reducción de emisiones. Eso ya son entended que son 3 líneas específicas que ya asumimos dentro de nuestra gestión a futuro, ya integrándola en nuestro día a día. Por otra parte, por centrarme un poquito también en todo lo que puedan ser los efectos de adaptación, pues hombre, en toda esta cuestión nosotros hemos de estar muy atentos y verdaderamente seguimos los distintos estudios que ya se van particularizando, pues desde instituciones científicas, universidades, instituciones gubernamentales que van abordando toda esta cuestión y específicamente todos aquellos que ya empiezan a hacer predicciones, digámosle ya fundamentadas, en el área del Mediterráneo. Al final es donde nosotros estamos ubicados. Este es un tema que vamos siguiendo y que entendemos que hemos de estar muy atentos para ver esas proyecciones y la afección real que en el futuro nos pueden producir. Destacar que ya a día de hoy, en algunos aspectos, ya estamos teniendo en cuenta acciones. A nivel os diría, de régimen de lluvias y de intensidad de lluvias, ya estamos teniendo en cuenta aumentos en el régimen extremal de precipitaciones, tanto por la posibilidad de cantidad como intensidad. Pues porque entendemos que es casi una realidad. Aquí vamos muy de la mano de Becasa, que es una empresa municipal que realiza toda la gestión del alcantarillado, y ellos mismos ya prevén esta variación del clima extremal a la hora de dimensionar en este momento las nuevas infraestructuras de drenaje. Entonces, en todo aquello que podemos ya en el dimensionamiento de nuevas infraestructuras, pues algunos aspectos ya entendemos que los tenemos que ir integrando y haciendo. Me consta que desarrollos de nuevas naves logísticas importantes, recientes, que se han realizado en el puerto de Barcelona, lo que es algo tan sencillo como el sistema de drenaje de las cubiertas, se está dimensionando significativamente por encima de lo que hoy por hoy obligaría la normativa. Pues porque la realidad es que con los regímenes extremales que hemos tenido en años recientes, pues ha habido problemáticas reiteradas ya en naves construidas pues en 10, 15, 20 años atrás. Entonces ya es cuestión de estar al día e irnos adaptando. A nivel de infraestructura más marítima, digámosle diques o protección, o sobre todo frente a todo lo que pueda ser oleaje, agitación y otro de los grandes aspectos en los que podemos sufrir los puertos o incremento de nivel del mar. Hombre, nosotros podemos destacar al menos que el puerto de Barcelona tiene la infraestructura muy nueva o bastante renovada. El puerto de Barcelona abordó una gran ampliación desde proyectada, ejecutada y construida pues entre 2000 y 2010, hoy por hoy ya plenamente operativa. Incluso poco después, el resto de diques de tramos antiguos o anteriores que podían quedar, ya abordamos una actualización y una renovación. Entonces podemos decir que hoy por hoy nuestra infraestructura está actualizada simplemente a 10 años, a partir del año 2010. A pesar de todo, no nos podemos fiar. Somos plenamente conscientes de que solo el ejemplo del temporal Gloria de enero del año 2020, que sufrió todo el frente mediterráneo, pues nos ponen de manifiesto que tendremos que irlo siguiendo y estar atentos. Y posiblemente en el futuro o incrementar mantenimientos, reposiciones de bloques u otras actuaciones, o llegado un caso alguna actuación significativa de adaptación y de mejora.
Gracias, Ramón. Thanks, Ramón. Also, with this kind of topics, we have maybe the problem that we are having also in the ports is a social perception of the port activities. As you know, we have the idea in the society that the port are always making pollution from the cities, and maybe it's not all the truth that we want to hear when we are talking about ports. So it's just another problem that we find, the perception for sure. To to be sure of the pollution and damage to health. However, the spirit of the sector do not think the same of this kind of conversation. In some extent, I'm also can testify from the Port of Barcelona the work that they're making for change this perception of the society of our city. So my question for all of you is, can you explain which is the position of your organization in this regard? Mark, please.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jesus. And I want to say that from our side, we have the chance to have been working through several programs with many port authorities around the world, and with diversity and inclusiveness. So working with the large one, the medium-sized one, small port authorities, also port authorities that are in the small island developing states, because the challenges are enormous for them, or port authorities that are managing more than 100 ports and terminals, if I take the case of Philippines. So we have seen the efforts in the last 5-10 years that they're engaging. And it's not only in terms of infrastructure, but it's also in terms of communication. And you could see examples. I mean, we're also working alongside with the International Association of Ports and Harbors, and they developed fantastic communication and website where they're trying to collect the efforts that are being done by their own members. And from our side, what we see, we know it's happening, but I would say sometimes they don't communicate enough. So we try to really invite them to use more channels and communication, because in this time of digitalization, communication has become of utmost importance, and we know they are investing in it. So a lot of ports now are also greening their physical space, and we could see that in many of the ports we partner. For instance, in the Belfast Harbour, recently they've acquired those green spaces where they try to really bridge with the city. A lot of those ports historically have been built around cities, or cities came around the port and starting developing. So they're really trying to make efforts to open up. And even if I take the case of Antwerp in Belgium, people can cycle inside the port and kind of visit every day. If I take Dublin Port Company, we also work with them. They're doing the same. In Malaysia, I work with the port of Johor Port Berhad. They also have tried to plant a lot of trees, recycle the rainy water to water those plants, so they make at the same time energy management efficiency. I think that was mentioned also by Ramon. So I believe from our side, we're experiencing that, and we are favoring it. In our training and capacity building program, we highlight those cases. For instance, we ask the participants to identify national case studies and present them, and they get certified for that, and we publish in UNCTAD the best cases. And we link it to the SDGs, because as you know, there are specific SDGs that we're monitoring with indicators, and there's one full one dedicated to climate change, but also life of ocean or land, etc. So we try to really showcase that, because efforts are being done, and I believe slowly by slowly the perception is changing. And there is one also, as a last example for me, in Nigeria, where I also work in the port of Lagos, on noise pollution, because this is a bit sometimes the forgotten one, but on big factories there, I've had some of the port managers making really good works on trying to show the damages on people, workers, of noise pollution. So those are all elements that are being done, but we probably need to do much more on communicating them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Also from the European ports, we know from the universities, we know the big work that you are making with all the papers, documentation, and guides that you are having. So can you explain the position of the European ports? Isabel?
Yes, thank you. It is very much at the core of what we are doing in ESPO on bottom-up work, let's say, because ports, it's indeed, we see that they are often, and I would say more and more, seen as the problem. We are a bit the visible part of pollution, the visible part of pollution of the many stakeholders, the ship. There is a ship with a dirty chimney or whatever that sails away, but the port stays on the spot, and it's ports that will be blamed. And ports They are engines of economy, of growth, but they are consequently maybe also engines of pollution. But we must see that the cities are what they are because of the ports. We certainly see that in Europe. I mean, the big urban agglomerations, if you look at heritage and so on, they are all developed there. Barcelona, perfect example, because of the port. And I think that it's time to revalorize this port-city relationship, and because we should see that the port of the future is maybe going back to the port of the past, where the port is at the center of things. Because as I said before, there is this changing of ports, there are the synergies, ports are bringing back together a lot of activities, so avoiding unnecessary transport. They are also an employer for the citizen, which then do not have to go far to work. But we have this whole issue of ports as hubs of clean energy. If we look at circular economy, ports are ideal locations. The waste of the city can become the energy of the port and vice versa. Also on blue economy, we see offshore ports are a unique landing. The interesting thing with this new roles as energy is that we do not always have to be a centrally located port or a real light view be portrayed. So it could be that you're a port in a more remote area. I think Mark also referred to that. Smaller ports, maybe more remote regions, can become very important in offshore and just boost the region and also then the cities who are maybe a bit less centrally located. So, and what is important in all that is that we explain that, and ports are evolving, and ports are not anymore deserted. If people are honest and they go and visit ports and see ports, then they will see that these are very clean places, that there is a lot of green. I give 1,000 examples, and so we change, the port change, but citizens should also admit and say, okay, ports have changed, and I think we should arrive to a moment where also citizens rediscover their port and the assets of the port, the added value, that they say, maybe I'm proud to have a port in my backyard. So that is something we try to do forward as well, where we give each year a prize for a port that has something exceptional in city relations, and it's based on a theme. And this year we worked around the theme of how the port plays a role in the recovery of the city and the environment around it. And we do not only talk about economic recovery, we talk social recovery and cultural recovery. And there we again have 11 submissions and very interesting and first project where you really see that are caring about their cities. And so this is something that we hope this revaloration, this revamping of the relation, to be proud of your ports, that we can have that coming and more to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabel, for your point of view from European ports. Ramón, como sabes, también es un tema que nos afecta en el puerto de Barcelona, como en todos los puertos. Me gustaría saber la visión de la Autoridad Portuaria de Barcelona en este aspecto.
Pues a ver, muchas gracias. En concreto, a mí me gustaría plantear, o como mínimo aclarar, confirmar, que la lucha contra la contaminación o contra las emisiones contaminantes, tal como he dicho, es una de las líneas estratégicas de nuestro plan estratégico y está marcado así como una de las líneas principales en nuestra gestión de cara al futuro. También quiero destacar que es algo que llevamos trabajando ya desde hace tiempo, no simplemente que nos hayamos añadido ahora, ya hace toda una serie de años en que es una cuestión en la que en el mismo momento en que entró en el debate público, desde el puerto de Barcelona entendimos que había que tomar acciones y posicionarnos. Yo diría que la lucha contra las emisiones tiene un doble sentido, o yo al menos le veo un doble sentido, claramente contra la lucha contra el cambio climático y para mitigar los efectos, pero evidente y adicionalmente es un tema de salud, pública. Pues porque es claro que las emisiones contaminantes, nadie lo va a negar, pues al final influyen en temas de salud, enfermedades pulmonares y otras cuestiones. Y al final los puertos, estando cercanos o integrados en ciudades, pues es evidente, somos contribuidores en cuanto a todo lo que son los volúmenes de emisiones. Yo confirmar y destacar que nuestra voluntad, alineación en la lucha contra estos temas es clara y manifiesta. Y es que así vamos a seguir y así lo estamos haciendo. Pero en cierta forma, hombre, yo manifestar nuestra discrepancia en muchas veces la asignación o la contribución que se nos hace a los puertos. Pues porque desgraciadamente parece que en general el sector marítimo y a la logística y a toda la actividad portuaria se le ha asignado un papel, bien por los barcos, pues porque sí, son muy grandes, tienen unas máquinas muy grandes, unas emisiones concretas muy grandes, y se le ha asignado unas emisiones y una representatividad muchas veces muy por encima de la que después, con estudios reales y estudios científicos, que en nuestro caso nosotros hemos promovido, se han manifestado como las reales de lo que son los puertos a la actividad de la ciudad o a los volúmenes que verdaderamente se destacan en las ciudades. Cada caso es un mundo y posiblemente cada puerto, pues en función de la configuración y de si el puerto está más integrado o menos en la ciudad, pues puede ser diferente. Pero Barcelona, en Puerto de Barcelona, nuestra actividad está suficientemente ladeada de la ciudad, tenemos la montaña de Montjuïc por en medio, y al final nuestra contribución real a la ciudad, nosotros no nos cansamos de destacar que las cifras que nosotros entendemos no son las que muchas veces se nos asignan. En cualquier caso, nosotros entendemos que es un aspecto en el que hay que luchar, hay que mejorar y estamos trabajando en ello.
Gracias, Ramón. Es un punto que hemos conseguido los tres ponentes y que pienso que es importante decirle a la ciudadanía que existen también nuevas legislaciones, ¿no? Y a nivel internacional que regulan precisamente estas emisiones. Nos llega una pregunta del público, ¿no? Que I will make the question in English for all the panelists. So, how affect the European regulation over the budget, the community budget, in the improvement of the port infrastructure for mitigate the climate change? So this is a question. Maybe Isabel can answer this question, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, of course, what we see is that in the different tools, be it how would I say, the most important or the classical instrument to support transport infrastructure, which is the Connecting Europe facility. But then we have the whole recovery budget. Then we have the whole general budget, the regional budget lines. In all budget lines, and in Europe it works in periods like of 7 years. We see that now for the next 7 years. The climate is a red line. So if you are not working on climate investments, let's say, then you will not have, or climate-friendly investments, then you will not have the chance to get funding. And this is very important and very good. But what is also important to see is that, and I touched upon that in my previous answers, it's also the link between the greening and the impact on the basic infrastructure. We should not only see greening and green investments in the narrow sense of the word. For instance, you think about onshore power supply, of course, and this is a green investment, and this will be very much supported at European level, at least we hope. But what is more importantly is that if you, for instance, want to play a role in being a sport landing point for offshore power, for windmills, offshore wind energy, you will have to adapt access lanes to the port, for work, your keys, your connectivities, and so on. This will also require investments and some changes in basic infrastructure. And we do hope that the Commission or let's say the funding mechanism will also look into that, because otherwise you cannot realize the investments and you cannot play as all you want to play in this green. But so just to conclude, yeah, there will be, for instance, if we talk about building on the budgets, also even the EIB and so on, climate will be an essential condition for getting funding.
Thank you very much. So I made the time to say goodbye to this section. So if you want to say something for close, all of you have 1 minute to say something for close this session. So you have the word. Maybe we start with Mark again.
Yes, thank you, Jesus. And allow me to just come back into the fact that I believe from our side we're observing the ports are doing the change. And we have to remember that the maritime and port sector are capital intensive. There are a huge amount of money that are being invested, and on a very, very long term. And then you could see very recently, I read that the Canadian pension fund was actually buying back some ports in America, investing 100% in it. So you see, it's also a profitable business. So they are greening, they are operating, those changing, and I really, really appreciate and commend the Port of Barcelona and Ramon for mentioning that I took good note that you're changing your master plan, because this is really the basis. And I believe this should be a message that goes out from my side, is that you need to adapt your strategic master plan, because a lot of them have been built in the ports we're working it for the horizon 2030, 40. Some of them, even if you look at Singapore, they've done a master plan for 100 years. And they've put the money to make sure they stay on top of the water at 100 years vision. I don't see many institutions doing that. So this is very recommendable. And I like also the fact of you mentioned economic and social. So your master plan should also consider corporate social responsibility or any social taking care of vulnerable people, because the ports have that capacity. Ports are capital intensive. They are national strategic assets in each of the countries, and the people managing the ports have the political connections and will to make it happen. So that's from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Isabel, please.
Yes, if I can just continue on what Mark says, I think this is also the important thing if we look at, or the challenging thing in this whole climate debate, and is ports will have to adapt, will have to change, will have to adapt their strategies. But ports are heavy assets at the same time, and we see that also the technology, the solutions, the way to answer to this challenge, the intelligence about that is changing every day and overnight. I mean, we want to the greening, the shipping sector has to green, but we are not seeing yet clear in which direction this will go and what will be all the technologies. And this is a challenging thing, but certainly for ports, because you have to ask permissions, authorizations, you have to find the funding and so on. So these are long-term processes, but you have a short-term change in reality. So for ports, it will be very important to have the tools to the management, the ports governance, to be able to change, to be agile and move and adapt. And the same thing goes for the legislation, that we must see that ports can function in a legislative network, framework that allows to steer, to adapt, to respond, and to pursue a strategy in function of the changing reality. So that will be a challenge, but that is very important.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Ramón, por favor.
Hombre, pues gracias. Yo al menos quería también concluir manifestando que toda la lucha contra el cambio climático es un problema global y muy amplio. Pero adicionalmente expresar un punto. En esta cuestión no es solo los puertos. Aquí hay múltiples actores y en el caso del sector marítimo, pues nos encontramos con que hay desde armadores, transportistas, distintos organismos reguladores, que son los que tienen la capacidad legal para promover y verdaderamente propiciar ciertos cambios, que son los que hemos de conseguir trabajar todos conjuntamente y a la vez, y alinear esfuerzos. Entonces, a pesar de ello, los puertos entiendo que hemos de ser catalizadores, no podemos estar estáticos, hemos de promover, participar y potenciar todo este cambio y ir tomando medidas, pero teniendo en cuenta que hemos de ir trabajando para alinearnos conjuntamente con el resto de actores que he manifestado. No es algo en lo que arbitrariamente los puertos podemos articular y hacer y deshacer. En muchas de estas cuestiones necesitamos la participación o involucrar o conseguir que vengan otros actores. Yo simplemente por concluir, porque os he ido marcando gran parte de las líneas estratégicas y filosóficas, pero al menos destacar que nosotros en Barcelona llevamos tomando acciones desde hace mucho tiempo y al menos brevemente pues destacar que desde hace años se están realizando bonificaciones de tasas para todos los buques que vienen con menos emisiones o con emisiones menos contaminantes. Estamos promoviendo el bunkering con GNL, se ha regulado el servicio, ya es perfectamente aplicable en el puerto de Barcelona y más cuando tenemos una planta de regasificación. Se está promocionando, se está intentando conseguir que exista un servicio de gabarra permanente para bunkering con GNL. Estamos trabajando en un proyecto global de electrificación de muelles con la intención de que en nuestro plan estratégico en 5 o 10 años querríamos tener electrificados el 50% de muelles para que pudiera haber conexión directa a buques mientras están amarrados. Y que ni estamos quietos en eso, es que ya estamos potenciando un par de proyectos piloto que queremos arrancar este año para al menos en un par de atraques o en un par de muelles ya poder hacer la primera prueba y ver un poco cómo integramos esto y cómo funciona, cuando aún este tema prácticamente no está ni regulado aquí en España. A nivel de movilidad terrestre, pues es que tenemos múltiples acciones. Nuestra flota de vehículos es 100% eléctrica, o al menos la que se mueve por el puerto. En nuestras licitaciones potenciamos que la gente que venga con movilidad eco. El transporte público interno que tenemos ya lo estamos cambiando a híbrido o a eco. Y estamos potenciando que el transporte terrestre también se mueva o vaya hacia combustibles menos contaminantes, principalmente el gas comprimido.
Pues muchísimas gracias, Ramón. Son líneas y son retos y compromisos que seguiremos en este mundo que inevitablemente llegará a este cambio climático. Gracias, thanks a lot.
Isabel, until next time.
Until next time.
Until next time. Jesús,
Gracias.
yo lo único que me pregunto es, ¿será posible cuando nos marcamos las fechas de 2040? Estamos de acuerdo, quedan prácticamente 2 décadas, pero solo con 20 años, menos de 20 años, ¿podemos transformar lo que llevamos arrastrando durante los últimos 50, 80?
Claro, es una pregunta que nos hacemos todos, ¿no? Pero
Es
si no
increíble.
nos ponemos estos retos tan próximos, tampoco haremos el esfuerzo suficiente para lograrlo.
Bueno, Ramón, tenéis trabajo aquí. Os habéis marcado muchas metas y lo que decía Isabel, yo creo que es muy interesante que desde las universidades se haga este trabajo, ¿no?
Sí.
No sé si esto veis un poco la diferencia, sobre todo
Sí.
Jesús como académico, respecto a otros países.
Sí, estamos trabajando muchísimo. De hecho, el componente ambiental es obligatorio en nuestra formación y, por supuesto, la promoción de ideas de los estudiantes que muchas veces nos nutren a nosotros como docentes de estas nuevas iniciativas.
Bueno, pues sí, desde el mundo estudiantil ya podemos ver los cambios. Aquí hay un cambio, ¿no?, de impresiones con los profesores que puede ser muy interesante. Sí. Gracias a los 4, a los 2 que nos seguían en formato online, físicamente. Ramón, muchas gracias. Nosotros hacemos ahora una breve pausa y es el momento en el que damos paso a los Inspirational Talks. Ahora tenemos a Patricia Ramírez. Ella es psicóloga y hemos titulado su ponencia como un Be Inspired, protagonista de tu propia vida. Recordad que los Inspirational Talks los tenéis en cualquier de los 10 canales que tenemos para ofreceros, pero en este caso se hará en directo desde el BNEW Talent. Muchísimas Muchísimas gracias. Nosotros hacemos una pausa, volvemos dentro de una hora para hablar de más logística desde la antigua fábrica Estrella Damm. Recordad, un BNEW, una Barcelona New Economic Week, que organiza el Consorci de la Zona Franca de Barcelona. Volvemos en 60 minutos. Gracias.